It's time for The Perspective with your hosts, Pastor Mike Sherbino, who's been building churches across Canada for a whole lot of years. Always ready with some good old-fashioned comedy, Mike shares his hard-won Christian wisdom and experience. And we call him marvelous around here, Mitch Hunter, whose own experience as a youth pastor and musician helps him connect with people of all walks of life. The Perspective welcomes a host of thought leaders, seekers, healers, and followers, all to hear God's voice that speaks in all languages. So sit back and relax, and don't worry, this isn't a show about the things you're doing wrong. It's a show about a whole lot of good news. From a mighty church just outside of Toronto, here's Mike and Mitch.
You've heard the phrase, making a difference. Have you ever thought about what it means for you? What could it be that maybe you're feeling that nudge, that tug inside to step out of your comfort zone and do something that you're actually hoping someone else will do? Have you ever struggled with that, Mitch?
Yeah, Mike, I mean, it's easy for me to say, oh, somebody else will handle it, but I've heard enough people say to me, hey, it's actually on each of us to handle it. And so there comes a time where I start to get a little uncomfortable, say, hey, are they really talking about me?
Well, the gentleman that we have on the program today, he is making a difference.
Absolutely.
And he still is. And it was more than just going across the street to take cookies to the neighbor.
Yep.
Reached into a very dark segment of society that we're going to talk about in just a moment, how he impacted the Ku Klux Klan. And words that, we don't normally use on television or anywhere. We just forget about that. But we're going to have this man come right now, Daryl Davis, musician, activist, and someone who passionately loves Jesus. Daryl, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Mitch, for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here with you guys.
Probably like all of us, but your story is complex, and your involvement with the KKK sparked an international and viral sensation. Can you take us back and give us a little snapshot of who you were, what motivated you, and some of the things that have come right now into the now?
Sure. Well, it's actually a story of who I always have been. I was a child of parents in the U.S. Foreign Service, so I spent a lot of time traveling the world as a kid. And now today, as a professional musician, I travel the world once again. And I've been to 62 countries on 6 continents. I've played in all 50 of our U.S. states. So I've always been exposed to people. And I'm a firm believer that a missed opportunity for dialogue is a missed opportunity for conflict resolution. So when I see conflict, I always want to be able to navigate it successfully.
Wow. Amazing. So I'm just thinking, I stopped on the musician aspect and I'm thinking, you got to come to St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, where we record. We want to hear your music.
Well, so I was going to say,
love to.
Daryl, I was listening to some of your stuff last night, and we could see it in the intro. Got some clips of me playing guitar, and I love electric guitar. I was listening to some of the work you did, and I said, man, I would just love to play with that guy sometime. So that was great. Would you tell us a bit about how playing music and learning to connect with people has helped you with the difficult work you do, talking to people on the, let's say, the ideological opposite end of the spectrum, people in the KKK? How does music help you to bridge that, or does it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I hate to use a cliche, but music is the universal language. And everybody likes music, whether they are white supremacists, Black people, Jewish people, all kinds of people like music. And so when they connect with what they are hearing, all of a sudden they don't see your color. They don't see your religion. They don't see your preference or your socioeconomic status. It's something that makes them feel good. It reaches to the inner soul of human beings. And that's why, for one thing, gospel music is so great.
Wow, right.
So take us to this confrontation that you had as you began to build a relationship with someone in the Klan. What spurred you to do this in the first place?
Actually, it was music that brought me in contact. I was playing in an all-white lounge with an all-white band. I was the only Black person in there. Now, I mean, there were no rules or signs saying no Blacks allowed, but it had that reputation. But here I was in this lounge, and when I came off the bandstand after the first set, a white gentleman came up to me and said how much he loved my piano playing, and that this was the first time he'd ever heard a Black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. Well, I was surprised because this guy was, maybe a decade and a half older than me, and he had never realized the Black origin of Jerry Lee Lewis's piano style. And I proceeded to explain to him that it came from the same place. Jerry Lee got it from the same place that I did, from Black blues and boogie woogie piano players. Well, he was incredulous. He didn't believe that Jerry Lee learned anything from Black people, even after I told him Jerry Lee was a good friend of mine and told me himself where he learned.
No way.
He didn't believe that either. But long story short, this guy turned out to be a Klansman, and he had invited me back to his table to buy me a drink. He found me to be a novelty. He was fascinated by me because of the way I played that music, speaking about that connection. So the music got him to leave his seat, walk across the dance floor, and approach me at the foot of the stage as I came off on break. So, we talked about the Klan and a few other things, but he began coming to all my gigs there and bringing other members of the Klan. So that was a connection spurred on by music. It is the universal language.
So, Daryl, I want to jump into that interaction that you just described, and you said that you seemed to him something like an anomaly, that you were fascinating to him. He'd never understood that maybe a Black person could play music well, and so you were like a novelty. I'm just trying to imagine what it might have been like to be in your place. Was that not uncomfortable for you to say, this guy is talking to me just because I'm surprising and interesting to him? What's that like? How do you process feelings like that?
Well, I've been around a lot of different people around the world. And so I've been an anomaly to many people. People have been an anomaly to me. When you do that much travel, let me give you my favorite quote, and perhaps that could explain me.
Sure.
My favorite quote of all time is by Mark Twain, and it's called, the author Mark Twain, and it's called the travel quote. And Mark Twain said, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness.
Wow.
And many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime."
That is powerful. So powerful.
I was happy to share my knowledge and experience with him. And then, of course, when he revealed he was a Klansman, that piqued my curiosity because racism has always fascinated me. So, we talked about the Klan and a few other things, but it wasn't until a few years later that I decided I want to write a book on the Klan and travel all across the United States, up north, down south, Midwest, West, and interview Klan leaders and Klan members. So he was, my catalyst for that. Wow. Because ever since childhood and my first racist experience, I had a question in my mind formed from the age of 10, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? Well, guess what? The answer fell into my lap. Who better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization that has over 100-year history of practicing hating people who don't look like them and who don't believe as they believe.
So, Daryl, what's the answer to that question? Because now I'm wondering, and you have my attention too, what is the answer to why would somebody hate another person just for seeing the color of their skin? Have you found an answer to that?
Yes, and generally I get two answers. One in the beginning and one in the end when they quit. The one in the beginning, how can you hate me if you don't even know me? The answer is, I'm inferior. Black people are prone to crime. We're born with a smaller brain than white people. The larger the brain, the more capacity for intelligence. The smaller the brain, the lower the IQ. The crime thing is evidenced by the fact in this country that there are more blacks in prison than white people. So that that data, which is accurate, simply confirms the person's already established bias. But he does not go beyond the data to find out, oh, well, maybe there are more black people in prison because our judicial system is imbalanced. Exactly. That sends blacks to prison for a longer time than white people who committed the same crime. So, that's the answer that I get initially, that basically I'm inferior. But then when they quit and renounce that organization after becoming friends with me, the answer is, Daryl, I'm really sorry. I really don't know why I hated you.
Wow. Daryl, I am just blown away by how articulately you have described the situation. And I'm going to be quoting you in the future. But I just want our viewers to hang with us because I want to go back right after this short break and have Daryl unpack the journey of how over 200 Klansmen left that organization. The power of music, the power of love, power of building friendships. We'll be right back with Daryl Davis. We're here again with Daryl Davis. And Daryl, I'm just itching for you to tell us, you had this conversation, it built up with a Klansman over a period of years. Talk
Yes.
to us through the process and how eventually so many people left the Klan and why.
Okay, well, basically this. The most powerful tool to resolve and mitigate conflict is the least expensive weapon that we have available to us. It's free, yet it's the most underused. It's called conversation. And what I've noticed in all my travels, no matter how far I go, whether it's to Canada right next door, or Mexico right next door, or halfway around the globe, no matter who I meet, who don't look like me, maybe don't speak my language or worship as I do, I always conclude that everybody I've met is a human being. And as such, we all want these 5 core values in our lives. Everyone wants to be loved. We all want to be respected. We want to be heard. We want to be treated fairly and truthfully. And everyone wants the same things for their family as we want for our family. And if we can learn to apply those 5 core values or any of those values when we find ourselves in an adversarial situation or a society or culture in which we are unfamiliar or uncomfortable, I can guarantee the navigation of that situation, that society, that culture will be much more smooth and much more positive. And those are the 5 tools I apply, gentlemen, when I am in the midst of controversy, speaking to people who hate me for no other reason than the color of my skin. And guess what? It works.
Well, Daryl, there's so many different directions I want to go here. There's one that's just occurring to me as you're speaking about the power of conversation and how when people actually sit and talk to each other, they realize that we are both people. And so walls can
Yes.
start to come down. I wonder what your take is on this. You know, I remember going to university, and certainly not the experience that I had is the same as yours, but there were times where people would come in and they would believe certain things about each other right out of the gate without even getting a chance to talk. They would already be angry and inflammatory. And my belief is that it is largely because of that they saw that behavior and those opinions reflected first on social media, on the internet, and then they decided to take that into personal interactions. What do you think about the use of social media and how that can inflame bias and anger and can detract from conversation? What's your takeaway or
Well,
thought
I
on that?
mean, it's a double-edged sword. It's like fire. If your house is cold, I can bring you fire and heat your house. If I'm angry at you, I can bring fire and burn your house down. So it's a double-edged sword, and it depends upon how we utilize social media. It can be used for great things. It's a great technological device, but as always, people always try to figure out ways to employ advancements to their own advancement, which oftentimes is negative.
But you've talked about the power of conversation, respecting people even when they didn't respect you. Why do so
look
many
at
people
Jesus
leave the
Christ.
Klan? Okay.
Well, look at Jesus Christ. People in the Bible say, I'm not my brother's keeper. Let's turn that around and let's become our brother's keeper. I don't believe, when somebody says, well, so you're an anti-racist. Well, I prefer to frame it another way. I'm not an anti-racist if the term racist is used as a noun, referring to the person who espouses racism. I am not against the person, the racist. I'm against the ideology, the racism, the ism of it. So, human beings are human beings. Yes, there's some bad actors, but I'm not against the actor. I'm against the actor's behavior. And I believe in being my brother's keeper. And so if there's something that I know that he doesn't know, then let me share it. Let me help to educate and uplift him, because I would want him to do the same for me.
How did you do that with the Klan? Was there some
by applying
specific?
those 5 principles.
Wow.
And it didn't
You know,
happen
that
overnight, did it?
Klansman,
It didn't
pardon
happen
me?
It didn't happen overnight either.
No, nothing happens overnight. You know, it's like, if I were to stand up and show you my gut, you'd say, whoa, this boy needs to lose some weight, which is true. But I used to be slim and trim. I put this weight on over time. And I wish I could lose it by tomorrow morning. But there's nothing in this world that's going to help me lose it by tomorrow morning. It's incremental. And so is, ideology. People did not become racist overnight. They put it on over time by surrounding themselves with that ideology, that echo chamber, etc. And they're going to lose it over time because it's hard to get rid of a habit. But it's always better to start off with a good habit than it is to try to break a bad one.
Well,
There was a Klansman. Let me tell you about a Klansman. This Klansman, his name was Johnny Lee Clary. And Johnny Lee was a vehement anti-Semite and vehement racist, very hardcore, very violent. But he finally saw the light. He discovered Jesus Christ. And he gave up that ideology and became an ordained minister. He just died a few years ago. But Johnny Lee would bring everybody into his congregation, regardless of their background, their color of their skin, etc. And he would chastise them. Because you know how people, act up Monday through Saturday, and then they come to church on Sunday to atone, and then the cycle repeats itself the next day, Monday through Saturday. He would chastise them and tell them, you cannot be a Sunday saint and a Monday ain't.
I like that. Okay. Mitch is itching to ask a question.
Yeah, Daryl,
Sure.
I'm still thinking about the first interview we did where you talked about this Klansman who said that he had what he thought were all these reasons for why he hated you based on the color of your skin, and you listed them. He thought he had scientific, social, political facts for why black people were inferior, and that shaped his belief. And that's what you told us a moment ago. My question is, racism and hatred based on or against other people, is that a head issue, as in people are taught to believe that, or they see facts and they say, well, here is intellectually why I hate people, or is this a heart issue? And they just, here's where my heart is, I'll align the facts however I have to. Is it a head issue or a heart issue or something else?
All of the above. It depends upon how they came into the Klan. Did they move to a town and it was a kind of a racist stronghold and they just assimilated into that group? Or were their parents involved in that kind of an organization and they were raised up in that kind of a household? Did they have a bad experience with 1 or 2 black people and they just, aggregated it and put it across the whole spectrum of black people? There are many different reasons. But the underlying fact is this. Racism is a learned behavior. You're not born with it. It is learned. And what can be learned can be unlearned. It just takes time. But here's the thing. We all, when we were kids, we heard things like a tiger does not change its stripes. A leopard does not change its spots, right? So why would we think that a white supremacist or a Klansman would change his robe and hood? That's who he is. Well, we're wrong if we think that way. Because yes, a tiger and leopard cannot change their spots and stripes. They were born with those spots and stripes. A Klansman is not born with his robe and hood. That is acquired. So therefore, it can be removed. It just takes some time. Like it's going to take me a little bit of time to lose this weight. If you guys call me up in a few months and want to interview me again for part 2, you will see I've lost some weight.
Well, Daryl, listen, this is not a weight loss program, but you have helped us to shed some very negative thoughts that many people have had. And I want to thank you for speaking hope into this racial issue, that it can begin with me and how I treat and approach and show the love of Christ to people. And you have just exemplified it so much. Thank you.
Speaking of Jesus Christ, may I just give you one more example of how a Klansman changed his mind and his heart. A Klansman was riding in my car with me one time, and he was sitting in the passenger seat, and we got on the topic of why they light the cross aflame, burn the cross. And he explained to me that fire is used symbolically on the cross. They said they use the cross because it's a Christian organization. The Ku Klux Klan is a Christian organization. It's not the kind of Christian that I know. But anyway, he said fire is symbolic. Fire is used as a purifier. Like if you get a splinter in your finger when you were a kid, Your mom takes a needle, sticks it in the flame, just purify the tip of the needle, and then digs the splinter out of your finger. So he says we use it symbolically because we are using it as the purity of the white race. And second reason we use it on the cross is because we are a Christian organization and we are lighting the way for Jesus Christ. I said, hold on a second, I'm driving. I said, hold on a second here. You must have a different Jesus Christ than I have. And he said, no, Daryl, there's only one Jesus Christ. I said, no, there are two. He goes, no, there's only one. I said, no, there are two. He says, what, is your Jesus Christ black or something? I said, no, he's not black. I said, but I can tell you one thing, he's not white either. I have been to Damascus, Syria. I've been to the area where allegedly Jesus Christ appeared, and he appeared as one of those people. And those people I saw over there are olive complected. So if anything, Jesus Christ was probably olive complected. He says, well, what's your point? I said, my point is, you said that you're lighting the way for Jesus Christ. And he says, well, that's right. If you were a Christian, you know that Jesus Christ is coming back and we're lighting the way. I said, well, that's my whole point. There are obviously two Jesus Christs because you have to light the way for your Jesus Christ. My Jesus Christ lights the way for me. Who are you to light the way for Jesus Christ? And he got very quiet. He got very quiet, but I could tell his wheels were spinning. And within 5 months, this man quit the Klan based on that conversation because he realized he'd been brainwashed to thinking he's lighting the way for Jesus Christ when the Bible says Jesus Christ is the light.
He is the light. Daryl, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Our time is up, but man, there's a whole message there again that you need to preach for us. I hope you'll come back on the program very soon.
Absolutely.
Hey, folks, stay with us. We're going to be right back in just a moment.
For those of us who follow Jesus, we have a book. It isn't a theology book. It isn't a rule book. This book is a story. The story of God and humanity. A story Jesus said he was fulfilling. This book contains poems, riddles, letters, puzzling narratives, and new ideas. Yet, throughout it all, this book is full of the breath of God. For those of us who follow Jesus, this book is a treasure. This book is a tree of life. This book is a page turner. Turn the page with us.
What gives you confidence in life? What really is your strength? What creates backbone in your life? Because it seems to me that if you have those things, you're also going to be experiencing what we've been talking about this whole week, and that is joy. The Apostle Paul talked about joy and the things that gave him joy and his choice to choose joy. And that is a big thing as well. Confidence for Paul came in the fact that he chose to be joyful. And he says actually farther on in his book of Philippians, the book of joy, he said, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God our Father. We need to choose joy. But something in particular brought incredible joy to Paul's life because it gave him a confidence. You know, in the book of Ecclesiastes, it talks about the power of two, but the power of three is even greater. You know, a twofold cord is hard to break, but a threefold cord, it's almost impossible. Well, Paul talks about the threefold cord, but he talks about it in the terms of partnerships. Listen to what he says in Philippians chapter 1 and verses 5 and 6. Well, he says, I always thank God in every prayer of mine for all of you making my prayer with joy. That was yesterday's teaching, praying with joy. Something powerfully happens when God's people pray with joy, with confidence, saying, Lord, I'm choosing to believe that you're here with me. Even though it's dark, I know the sun is shining behind those clouds. But here it comes. He says, why was he so joyful? Because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. There's something about a partnership. A friend of mine had a very successful car dealership, several car dealerships. And one of the things he'd attribute it to was his partner. They were partners for years and years until they sold the great enterprise. I think of a man named Billy Graham. Some of you might remember his name. What made his organization so successful? It was the partnership of the evangelist, the singer, the song leader. It was an amazing team of people. Partnerships are huge. And in a world that has just come out of COVID, we are very used to living in isolation. I believe actually there is something missing almost in our DNA right now because we have missed out on partnerships. And so a lot of times we're lost in our screens, seeing what's on our phone or on our tablet, but we have forgotten how to communicate. We've forgotten the importance of friendships. I am thankful in my own life for people who've gathered around me. My wife Terry and I have planted several churches, and every time we've done it, well, we might say, oh, I planted a church. That really isn't true. God was the one that gave the church growth, but there were people who surrounded us. And I can go back and forth across this country of Canada, and I have friends everywhere. Do you know why? Because we had partnerships. God never called you or I to live alone. And you know the Lone Ranger, some of you are old enough, you grew up watching that TV show. The Lone Ranger was never alone. He always had Tonto who came to rescue him. Paul says, I thank God for your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. And I am sure of this, that God who began a good work in you will bring it to completion when Christ returns. The power of partnership. Remember in the Old Testament, there was David and Jonathan, two friends. And David is running for his life. He is hiding in the wilderness. And it says, Jonathan came to him and encouraged him in the Lord. Why did he encourage him? Because Jonathan cared deeply. He loved him as a brother. But he encouraged him. He said, David, don't be afraid. You will be king one day, and even my father Saul knows that. The power of a partnership is that you can speak truth into people's lives. And Jonathan spoke a prophetic word into David's life at that point. You know, Paul was doing the same thing for the church at Philippi. He was reminding them over and over again that God was the one who was there for them, that God would not let them down, that God would be faithful. And just as Paul was in prison, so the church was caring for him. They were praying for him. They were supporting him as they were able. It's a beautiful picture, the partnership. But also with the partnership came the promise. And what was the promise is what he said here, because God who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. Sometimes when I have taken part in a baptism, I've shared that verse with people because they're starting out on their journey with Jesus, and maybe you just started out on your journey or thinking about it, you're wondering, how am I going to get through it? How am I going to make it? Well, here's the promise. God who's begun a good work in you is going to bring it to completion. He's not going to fail you. He is not going to forsake you. And I'm going to tell you, most days in life, life is not a beach. As beautiful as this beach is, a lot of times there are the ups, the downs, the hard times. You need partnerships. I want to encourage you to get connected in a local church, to be part of a Bible study group, a life group, where people can gather around you and encourage you. We need that. And the example is given right here in Scripture. It's one of the secrets to walking in joy.